In today's video, we're jumping back to our NHL offseason plan series. Today we look at the 24th ranked team from the regular season, the Calgary Flames. The Calgary Flames were one of the more interesting teams to watch throughout the 23-24 campaign. All kinds of changes. What further changes should we expect from them this offseason? And can they get back to playoff contention? Or is this going to be more of a rebuild? We'll discuss what to expect from the Flames coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we're jumping back to our NHL offseason plan series, and we're going to analyze the Calgary Flames here today in this video. So we're first going to recap the 23-24 season, take a look at some key team and individual performances, take a look at all the changes the team went through during the season, analyze their salary cap situation, expiring contracts, look ahead to the draft, and the top questions facing the franchise that they should look to answer throughout the offseason. So let's get started first by recapping the 23-24 campaign. It was not a great campaign. It was a 38-39-5 record, so a little bit under 500, 81 points. That's certainly a good step back here. Not a team that was destined to make the playoffs this year. They scored 253 goals, a little bit below league average at 18th best. Goals against, certainly higher than they would like it to be, 267 for 23rd best in the NHL. The power play was not overly dangerous, only rocked a 17.9% success rate, which was 26th best. The one big bright spot on special teams, though, was they had a top 10 penalty kill, 80.8% for 9th best overall in the NHL. So clearly this team did not really... even though the scoring was okay, it was not good on the power play, and they gave up way too much. It was a combination of things that just were not clicking in Calgary, and to me, a large part of the problem with the Flames this year was the fact that there was, I think, a lot of distractions. It was well known going into the season even that a lot of their veterans, a lot of their pending UFAs seemed unlikely to return. We knew the new GM, Craig Conroy, and the new head coach, Ryan Huska, had their work cut out for them, given all the uncertainty. Craig Conroy made it known early on that he was not going to let this team lose a bunch of pending UFAs for nothing. They had just lost the franchise player the offseason before, and Johnny Gaudreau, who kind of let the team believe there was a chance he was going to stay, and maybe that was, I'm not saying he led them on because I can't really verify that. I just know a lot of Flames fans felt that way because he did ultimately end up leaving, and they got nothing for him. Ultimately, he right down to the 11th hour, they thought they were in the mix to sign him and bring him back, and then just, cut a knife right through them here and walks. And then that, I think, played a role in the departure of Matthew Tkachuk, and suddenly, would Tkachuk have stayed if Gaudreau stayed? I can't say with certainty that he would have, but what an offseason. When you get one guy who doesn't sign like that, who's your best player, most productive player in that sense, and then you're right there with him for being the team's best player, Matthew Tkachuk, wants out. Like, that's just a real downer of an offseason, and it just completely changed the dynamic of this team. Daryl Sutter coming back did not really go well with this current group of guys, and it just set off a whole bunch of other players with a lot of uncertainty. Before the season even started, they traded Tyler Toffoli because he made it clear that he wasn't re-signing. They ended up trading Chris Tanev they get a second and a prospect for him. They traded Noah Hanifin. They got a couple of picks and a prospect there. Decent return from Vegas. They traded Zadorov fairly ahead of the deadline. Got a third. They traded Elias Lindholm to Vancouver as well. They got Kuzmenko and a first. I mean, that's not a bad trade. I think they did well in the Lindholm deal. But, I mean, that's a lot of players. Toffoli, Tanev, Hanifin, Zadorov, Lindholm. Like, all big pieces. And then, of course, that's 1 year removed from Gaudreau and Tkachuk. That completely changes this team. Last year's top performers were Nazem Kadri, who's one of the players they brought in to be a replacement when all these guys started to leave, with obviously Gaudreau and Tkachuk. Clearly, Kadri and Huberdeau and Weegar were the main ones that came in. Kadri and Weegar worked out fine. Huberdeau has not. Kadri put up 75 points last year to lead the team. Sharon Govich was second on the team with 59 points and putting up 31 goals. He was a nice addition. Came over in the Toffoli trade. Coleman had a good year. 54 points and 30 goals. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that was his first 30-goal season. Mackenzie Weegar from the back end had a 20-goal season, 52 points. And Jonathan Huberdeau had 52 points. That's, the fifth best offensive output on the team. Jonathan Huberdeau, when he was acquired, was, a typically 90-plus point player for, 80, 90 points, 100 points, number of times playing in Florida. It's just not worked out. It's really gotten ugly for Jonathan Huberdeau with the Calgary Flames, which is unfortunate because he really is a talented hockey player, and you can say what you want. Everybody can argue that anybody playing with Barkov is going to be better and likely put up better numbers, but shouldn't be that much of a difference. That's absolutely crazy. So this team went through significant change, and it was just like, it was one of the more fascinating teams to watch last year. It was one of the teams with the most rumors around it, the most uncertainty, just the most change. And it was crazy. Like, pretty much almost nobody stayed that was pending UFA. Now, after all that, the cap that they have lined up for next year right now has availability of $19.8 million. And they have 19 contracts on the books. So obviously they've already kind of gone through replacing a lot of these guys with some internal options. 19 contracts only means they're going to need to sign 3 or 4 players. They don't have a lot when it comes to restricted and unrestricted free agents on this team. On the RFA side of things, they have Nikita Okhotiuk, they have Dylan Dubé and Dustin Wolf, and that's actually another change when it comes to in-season change that I didn't mention. But of course, Dylan Dubé steps away from the team because he ended up being revealed as one of the 5 players from the 2018 World Junior team that is facing sexual assault charges. So at this point, we don't expect Dylan Dubé to return. Pretty much all the players, if I'm not mistaken, I think all the players that are facing charges are pending restricted free agents. So I'm not sure how that's going to be handled because at this point, I would suspect that none of them are going to be signed for sure. And not only that, but as an RFA, to even retain their rights for future, you have to tender a qualifying offer. I don't even know if that's going to happen because at the end of the day, teams might choose to walk away from these players, but at the same time, they have not been found guilty. I know based on everything that came forward through the investigations and everything that we've heard, it doesn't sound good. But again, this has not gone through the full trial, and we don't know. So I'm not sure how teams are going to handle the possibility of an innocence, outcome, and maybe taking them back. I have no clue. But we do know, the only thing I can say for certain is that it's another player that they lost, and another player that, of course, because of the circumstances around it, they don't get anything back. They do get some cap space, thankfully, but that's it. Dustin Wolf also needs a new contract. So, another player to take from this roster did not help matters at all. On the UFA side, you've got AJ Greer, Oliver Shillington, and Dennis Gilbert. I suspect Shillington to get a contract. Obviously, I have no doubt Dustin Wolf is going to get a contract. Outside of that, it's difficult to say. Is it possible AJ Greer returns on a short-term, cheaper contract? It's possible. But at the same time, it's far from a guarantee. So we know that the Flames right now have a lot of their players in place. They've brought in a fair bit of youth and given a fair bit of opportunity that way. And it's just going to be a matter of, what do they do to change this roster going forward, or how do they address things? So coming up, one of the big events for all teams, especially teams out of the playoffs, the 2024 NHL Draft. The Flames have 9 picks going into that event, which include 2 first-rounders and 9 picks overall. So certainly I expect the Calgary Flames to get themselves a pretty good prospect. Lots of chatter around Tisha Ginla. Will Ginla even be available when they pick at the current spot? I don't know. At 9th overall, he may or may not be there. The Calgary Flames are one of the teams that have been rumored to be having some motivation, some interest to want to move up in the draft. Certainly Iginla is probably not the only player that they really like in that top 10. However, they had great success with his father, and I just don't see a scenario where they're not going to do everything they can to land this top-notch young prospect. So could Calgary be one of the teams that we see move up? Could they offer, their first-round pick and the other first-rounder, maybe another asset? It's certainly something to think about for sure. So either way, they're going to get themselves a good player. It could be Iginla, it could be somebody else, but it's certainly going to be a big time. Also, I do expect activity around the draft in free agency when it comes to some trades. Will Calgary be active in free agency would be one of the top questions facing this team. The answer is, I don't know. I'm not so sure about that. At this point, I think they're focusing on youth. So I think they're going to explore, like they did through the season already, a lot of internal options with their younger players, younger prospects, giving them more opportunity. And then from there, I think we're going to see more activity via trade. One of the main trade pieces they have to work with is Jacob Markstrom. Is Markstrom finally going to be traded? He's one of the few veterans who seemed to be okay with getting dealt and had some interest in getting dealt, and it didn't happen. It was, at one point they had gone to him about waiving his no-move clause to go to New Jersey, and then it fell through. And the word is that the Flames were willing to retain money, but it sounds like they didn't quite get the okay from ownership to do that, and it's something that Flames owners are notoriously stingy with. They don't like to do that, and that did not get approved. And now there was talk later that New Jersey did re-engage those conversations and offer to take the full contract, but it never got to the finish line, and it never got to the point that it obviously happened. So could that be revisited? It absolutely could, and I do believe there'll be more than just New Jersey. I mean, New Jersey definitely wants to address goaltending, but they're not the only team. There's certainly probably a list of 3 or 4 teams out there that, or maybe even 5 or 6 to be honest, that make a lot of sense and will be probably at least having some conversations with Calgary. I mean, could Jacob Markstrom be involved in a bigger trade to maybe accelerate a retool in Calgary? We just posted a video in the last 24 or 48 hours exploring a Sportsnet article that had a bunch of different proposals for Mitch Marner. We know that the Maple Leafs are a team to watch. Their core 4 likely does not survive another offseason together. It's very, very likely that, unless everybody absolutely refuses to play ball and not move, but that because they do have some trade protection and no move clauses. But there's a lot of belief that Mitch Marner and or John Tavares will be asked to waive their no move and try to find a new home for them this offseason. And we just did a video based on a Sportsnet article on a bunch of trade proposals for Mitch Marner, and Calgary was right at the top of that list, offering a trade involving Jacob Markstrom and Rasmus Anderson, I believe is what they proposed for Marner and Nick Robertson and Timothy Liljegren, I believe it was. So, could they be involved with another high-profile trade to bring in a top player like Mitch Marner? It's hard to say. I mean, I do think they'll be involved in a trade to move Markstrom, but will it be in a type of deal for Marner? It's probably not super likely, but I tell you, if Craig Conroy is approached and have some of those conversations, that would be tempting. I do know that his former colleague, Brad Treliving, who now runs the Toronto Maple Leafs, certainly needs to address his goaltending, and obviously he's very familiar. He's the one that signed that contract for Markstrom. So will the Leafs talk to Calgary about Markstrom? Wouldn't be surprising, knowing that they have a core 4 or core 5, depending if you want to include Morgan Rielly in that conversation, trade talk around it. Could they maybe get into those types of conversations? Wouldn't be shocking at all, but will it be pulled off? I don't know. It's hard to say. Or is Calgary shy away from those big contracts? They shy away from taking on a significant player like that and just continue to move money out and kind of take this more into a rebuild. Hard to say, but Markstrom being dealt, very likely. You're looking at teams like Toronto, like New Jersey, like LA, maybe Ottawa. There's been some talk about Ottawa, given that they just hired Travis Green, who's a former head coach of Markstrom. So there could be some influence there. Ottawa would have to move Korpisalo, though, and he certainly wouldn't be a player that Calgary would want. So that would complicate things. But a number of teams looking for upgrades and different connections to the player. So we'll see. I do expect him to go. Hard to say where that is, though. Another big question is, what do they do with Jonathan Huberdeau? That's 2 failed campaigns, multiple coaches, different line mates. What the heck happened to Huberdeau? And can they find a way to reignite him? There were times this past year where he did look better and he was playing better, but he still only ended up with 52 points in the season, still lacking a ton of consistency. So you got to wonder, could there even be a scenario that presents itself where the Flames move him for another bad contract? I know there was a suggestion about a Huberdeau for Pierre-Luc Dubois out of LA, because obviously the Kings are quite frustrated with his contract and his play this past year. Again, different ages, but they both have similar contracts that are not great. Huberdeau has accomplished more in his career than Dubois has, that's for sure. He's a bit older and certainly has a higher level of point totals per year in the past than PLD does. But it's an interesting thought. Now, would LA want to do that, or would LA decide to take another chance on Dubois and hope that it gets better? It's only going to be more complicated as time goes on to find a new home if it's not working out and not getting better. So, again, another interesting trade thought to think of. Sharon Govich getting a contract extension is also a question this team will look at this offseason. To me, I was a little concerned over his end-of-season comments about contract and staying and all that. He sounded non-committal to me. And that doesn't mean that it won't get done. I just would think after having a breakout season, just getting traded there in the past year, it wasn't one of those, yeah, I love it here. I had a great season. I know it's unfortunate we didn't make the playoffs, but felt I grew a lot as a player. I'd love to sign here longer term. Nothing like that. It was just, and maybe it's his personality. I don't know. Maybe he really wasn't in love with it. I don't know. But if they lose him, if he doesn't really want to stay, doesn't want to sign, that's really going to suck, because that's going to mean that they got a great deal in the Toffoli trade. Now they're going to move that piece, and it's no guarantee they're going to, have that same success again on a trade. It's tough to win. So I hope for their sake that he does extend and stay, because he was a great player for them, and I think he can continue to get better still. But it just sounded non-committal at the end of the year, so I just had some concerns over his ability there. So, will free agency be an active time for them? Probably not. An extension-wise, Sharon Govich would be one of the main players to watch. Will they move out guys like Markstrom or Huberdeau? Could they be big players for some, guys coming in like Marner or Dubois? Probably not. And the more likely scenario is that the Flames are a quieter team, probably make a Markstrom trade, and outside of that, they sign a few of their internal players, continue to give more opportunities to their youth, and just be content with taking a step back for a little while they kind of build this thing back up. But some of those, big, crazy deals are fun to think about. I wouldn't be surprised if they're at least mildly discussed, but they just seem less likely to actually be executed. But let me know your thoughts on the Flames, what to expect from them this offseason down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you next time.